Hello, welcome to the seventh lecture on Shakespeare's Hamlet. And let's jump right into the play. I'm in your anthologies on page 1446. This is Act 3, Scene 2, often referred to as the play within the play scene. Remember, Hamlet has determined to put on a play to reenact the ghost tale of the murder of Hamlet's father. And he's doing this in order to catch the conscience of the king. And I've argued that this is one of the deterministic factors behind Hamlet's delay. Here, Hamlet is being rational. He's a rational man, and he has a rational plan. He's going to use art as an instrument, as a tool uh, of enlightenment. He's hoping to catch the conscience of the king. Perhaps Claudius will, when the mirror of nature is held up before Claudius's eyes, perhaps he'll perceive, Claudius will understand the enormity of his crime. If he indeed committed the crime, he'll comprehend, understand the horrific nature of having committed fratricide, of having killed his brother. And so let's turn to the play within the play. Hamlet has made some alterations to the original play. The play is entitled The Murder of Gonzago, and there are three principal characters in the play. And in Hamlet's mind, these characters are representing real people in Hamlet's life. So the Duke Gonzago, the Duke, his name is Duke Gonzago. He's representing the elder King Hamlet. And Baptista, the wife of the Duke, is assuming the role of Gertrude. And Lucianus, the villain in the piece, of course, is representing Claudius in Hamlet's mind. So, what happens in this play? Well, most critics argue that there are a number of ways that the play can be interpreted. What happens in Hamlet here? A number of interpretations here present themselves. Three specific interpretations. The play itself, The Murder of Gonzago, is divided into three parts: the dumb show, the dialogue, and the murder itself. And remember, Claudius is watching the play unfold. And what exactly occurs? What happens in the play? The first interpretation, scenario A, we'll call it, is that Claudius is indeed guilty of the crime. The ghost is telling the truth. And what happens when Claudius watches the play? Uh, First, the dumb show unfolds. Remember, the dumb show it's like a silent movie. The entire play is enacted, but no one speaks. And Claudius watches the dumb show, and when he doesn't react. If he's guilty, why doesn't he react? Some critics say that he's not paying attention to the dumb show, and that that's why he's not alerted in any way, and he doesn't react to what unfolds on the stage before him. But other critics say, yes, he does. He is watching. He does view the dumb show. But what happens is, and he recognizes, he's alerted, he sees the reenactment of his crime, his killing of his brother. He does see this, and it does alert him. It does worry him. But Claudius he recalls that no one witnessed the crime. So he imagines to himself, no one could possibly know I committed the perfect murder. No one could possibly know that I committed this crime, that I poisoned my brother while he was asleep in his garden. And so, therefore, it must just be a coincidence here. So Claudius is alerted, but he manages to maintain his composure, to remain calm. Remember, he is a very astute political man, and so he does manage here to not reveal himself, to not show that he's disturbed in any way by what he is seeing. But he is, as I've said, alerted. So he's anxious at this point. He wants to continue watching to see what unfolds, what happens, and he he is wary, but he does remain cool and collected. The next part of the play is the dialogue. That's the dialogue between the player king and the player queen, Gonzago and his wife Baptista. And the theme of the dialogue, in a nutshell, is woman's inconstancy. The idea that women can't be faithful uh, in love. And the player king tells the queen, if you recall, he says that when I die, perhaps you'll remarry. And the player queen interrupts him and protests. She cries out, "No, I shall never, ever marry again. After your death, I'll never remarry. I'll never rewed. And may my life be filled with strife and grief if I ever should remarry." So she protests that she loves only him and she will love only him always, even after he dies. So this idea that obviously you can imagine Hamlet writing these lines, inserting these lines in the play. You can imagine him writing them with uh, deep bitterness and contempt. He really wants to punish his mother here. And you see again another deterministic factor. Recall that I've argued that Hamlet wants to revenge himself on those around him at court, particularly on his Claudius and his mother, especially his mother, um, because of her hasty remarriage. Um, and so you can imagine Hamlet writing these lines and really wanting to lash out at her. And you can, when you read these lines, you can feel his contempt, his scorn, the scorn that he holds for his mother. And at this point in the play, Hamlet actually turns to his mother and he asks her, I'm on page 1446. Again, I'm in Act 3, Scene 2. At the bottom of the page, 1446, at line 217, Hamlet turns to his mother after the player king and queen have completed their dialogue, and he turns to her and he says, "Madam, how like you this play?" You see, he's really needling her here. He really wants to get a reaction from her. And her response is, "The lady doth protest too much, methinks." And sounds as if Gertrude is uh, feeling guilty, perhaps. Perhaps her conscience is bothering here after listening to this dialogue between the player king and the player queen. And she seems a bit upset as to what's occurred here. So it's at this point that Claudius well, Hamlet responds to her at the top of page 1447. So he says, "Madam, how like you this play?" She responds, "The lady doth protest too much, methinks." And at the top of page 1447, Hamlet retorts, "Oh, but she'll keep her word." So again, you can hear the sarcasm in his voice here, the bitterness, the irony that the player queen will remain faithful, but not his mother. His mother did not remain faithful. And it's here that the king, Claudius, he, um, he does react. And he turns to Hamlet at this point and says, "Have you heard the argument? Have you heard the plot of the play? Is there no offense in it? Is this play going to offend someone in the audience?" Now, you could argue that Claudius is stepping in on behalf of Gertrude, that he sees that his wife is distressed and that she's feeling uncomfortable. And so he's coming to her rescue. It's on her behalf that he interrupts Hamlet and Gertrude and asks this question. Claudius asks this question of Hamlet. Uh, but it's also, I would argue, it's more so an opportunity. Critics have noted it's more so an opportunity for Claudius to determine if this play is going to uh, um, ultimately reveal his guilt, his secret, Remember, we're assuming that Claudius is guilty in this first scenario. So this gives him a chance to perhaps stop the play, halt the play in its tracks before it has a chance to play out and uh, uh, perhaps reveal that Claudius is a murderer. So that's why he interrupts here. But Hamlet responds to Claudius. He says, "No, no, they do but jest, poison in jest, no offense in the world." You notice that poison in jest. Hamlet, again, remember the ghost story. The ghost told Hamlet that Hamlet's father was poisoned in the garden. While his father was asleep, he was poisoned by his uncle. His father was poisoned by his brother, Hamlet's uncle. "No, no, they do but jest," Hamlet says. He replies, "Poison and jest, no offense in the world." No offense in the world. So Claudius does react here in the dialogue, provides him with an opportunity, right? When Hamlet turns to Gertrude and asks her this question, how does she like the play? It provides Claudius with an opportunity to see if this play is going to is going to be reveal his guilt, is going to reveal his crime. The third part of the play, the interpretation scenario A, is yes, indeed, Claudius does his conscience is caught. The play does catch the conscience of the king, and that's why he rises and flees the stage, rushes from the stage, and with the rest of the court in tow. And so, this first interpretation is the idea that's underscored in the first interpretation is that Hamlet's plan succeeds. His plan to use art as a means of revelation, as a means of showing Claudius uh, uh, the evil that Claudius has done. That yes, it does succeed here. And this is how Hamlet interprets what occurs. This is how Hamlet interprets Claudius's reaction. Hamlet believes that the play does indeed succeed. It catches the conscience of the king, and that Claudius is in fact guilty, and that the ghost is telling the truth. This is also how most people in the audience interpret uh, uh, scenario A, and also most critics and most Shakespearean scholars. This is how they interpret this particular uh, uh, scenario as well, that Claudius is in fact guilty. But there are some critics who say that there are other possible scenarios that unfold here. And one of them is the second scenario here, which is scenario B, that Claudius is actually innocent, that he did not commit the crime, he did not murder his brother, the ghost is not telling the truth, but that the reason that Claudius reacts at the end here, the reason he interrupts the play and reacts and flees the stage is because he feels threatened by Hamlet. He feels threatened by Hamlet, and that's why he runs from the scene and he stands, he rises, and he cries out for light, and he runs from the scene. The third interpretation is that Claudius is indeed guilty. The play has done its work. It has revealed the truth. It has revealed the reality. Art has succeeded in being a tool, a means toward enlightenment. But that at the same time, Claudius feels threatened. So, in addition to the play having caught the conscience of the king, Claudius also believes that Hamlet is threatening him. And that so for both of these reasons is why both of these reasons um, are behind Claudius's uh, rushing from the stage. So to understand these other two interpretations, let's look a little more in detail at uh, the the third part, the murder uh, that occurs in the play here. So again, I'm at top of page 1447. So what happens? Let's look at scenario B. The idea that this is a possibility, that Claudius is innocent, but he feels threatened by Hamlet. So again, Claudius watches the dumb show. He doesn't react. He doesn't respond at all. Why doesn't he react to the dumb show, to this reenactment of the murder? It's because he's innocent. He has no reason to react. And that's why he doesn't say anything or reveal in any way his guilt, because he isn't guilty. So that's what happens for the dumb during the dumb show. The dialogue. Again, what happens here? Imagine now that Claudius is innocent. What happens here after the dialogue between the player king and the player queen? Well, remember, Hamlet turns to his mother and he says, once more, Madam, how like you this play? And she responds, the lady doth protest too much. And Hamlet says, ah, but she will keep her word. She'll keep her word. And it's here that Claudius does react again. Why does he react? He's coming to the defense of Gertrude. He sees that she's visibly disturbed. She's disconcerted. She's upset by what she's heard in this dialogue. And when Hamlet turns to her, in this mocking fashion and asks her these questions, you can see that she's growing more and more uncomfortable. And so Claudius reacts. Claudius is innocent, and he reacts because he is coming to Gertrude's rescue. He is asking Hamlet, is there any offense in this play? Should this play continue? Is it going to offend anyone? Because he's coming to Gertrude's rescue. And Hamlet responds, no, no, they do but jest, poison and jest, no offense in the world. No offense in the world, poison and jest. And the king continues, what do you call the play? So now the king, remember scenario B, what do you call the play? And Hamlet says, the mousetrap. Isn't that interesting? Because the play is called The Murder of Gonzago, but Hamlet here renames the play The Mousetrap. And you can think of why Hamlet's doing this. You can see what's happening here. Hamlet is unable, remember what Hamlet wanted to do. His desire was to sit back and let the play catch the conscience of the king. Hamlet wanted to try to distance himself emotionally from the situation. He was attempting to be objective, trying to be rational. But what we can see here is as the play, as the plot of the play unfolds, Hamlet is unable to restrain himself. He becomes more and more passionate, more and more angry, more and more bitter, and he allows his desires. He can't rein in his desires. He can't refrain from making these comments and speaking out and needling everyone and causing them, distress and making them feel uneasy. He's enjoying this. He's enjoying taking his revenge on them. And so here he renames the play The Mousetrap. And the idea is it's a trap to catch a mouse or a rat, if you will, the mousetrap. And he says, Mary, how? Tropically, figuratively. It's a metaphor. The mousetrap is a metaphor. Trap to catch someone. This play is the image of a murder done in Vienna. Gonzago is the Duke's name, his wife Baptista. You shall see anon. 'Tis a knavish piece of work. But what of that? Your Majesty and we that have free souls, it touches us not. So again, Hamlet, you can see he's really digging in here and enjoying watching everyone squirm, and particularly Claudius here. He's saying that this is the story of a murder, but that shouldn't offend anyone sitting here in the audience. Neither me shouldn't offend me, and it certainly shouldn't offend you, Claudians. It's a tale about a murder, and of course, we who are innocent, why would this disturb any of us in any way? So you can see the irony in these lines here. And then the villain enters the stage. Enter Lucianus. And Hamet points out, look what he says here. Again, notice that Hamlet can't keep quiet. He can't be still. He can't distance himself from what's occurring in this scene, in this particular situation. He's swept away, he's swept along by his desires, his need for revenge, his need. Remember his deep, deep disgust of Claudius, the disgust he holds for Claudius. And so he simply is unable to control himself. He says, "This is one Lucianus," when Lucianus, the villain of the piece, enters. "This is one Lucianus, nephew to the king." Nephew to the king. And one has to ask at this point, what king? And why nephew? Remember, this is the play about a duke, Duke Gonzago. So what does Hamlet mean by the villain of the piece, Lucianus, is the nephew to the king? What's happening here? Hamlet has renamed the play, hasn't he? It's now called The Mousetrap. And what's happening here is that Hamlet is subtly threatening Claudius, because now what is happening is that Gonzaga is representing Claudius, the king, the one who's to be murdered in this play, within the play. Baptista, of course, is representing Gertrude. But Lucianus now who is the nephew to the king, is the one who's going to come in and kill the king, sleeping while he's asleep in his garden. He's going to pour poison in the king's ear. And we know that Hamlet is the nephew of Claudius. So this is a very subtle threat here, isn't it? Nephew to the king. So Hamlet has changed. This is what he was going to allow just simply to occur, right? He was just going to have the players reenact this murder, and this is what he was going to allow this play to catch the conscience of the king. But instead, he has to interfere. He can't restrain himself in any way, and he's going to keep interfering with the production, interrupting the production. And what he's done here is he's changed the characters. And now Gonzago becomes Claudius, and Lucianus becomes Prince Hamlet. This is one Lucianus, nephew to the king. And look at, I'll just mention here at line 232, look at Ophelia's response. She turns to Hamlet and she says, "You are as good as a chorus, my lord." I think that's the Shakespeare's very deft way, very subtle way of saying Hamlet can't be quiet. He can't be still. I mean, if you've ever, let's say you've gone to the theater and you're watching a movie, if you've ever been disturbed by someone sitting in the theater who's constantly talking out loud and interrupting the film, this is what Ophelia's saying. You're as good as a chorus. You might as well be a chorus on stage, discussing all the action that's unfolding, because you keep interrupting the play, and uh, uh, you keep interfering with the production. And she says, "You are as good as a chorus, my lord." So I think Shakespeare is alerting us to the fact that Hamlet is once again being carried away by his emotions. We have this idea of his, formerly this idea to catch the conscience of the king. We have the man of reason, and he's battling with the man of desire, with his psychological need. He wants to find Claudius guilty. He wants the ghost story to be true. And this desire of his, this need of his, it's causing him to, well, look what it's caused him to do. It's caused him to change the story, to interrupt the story, his original intentions, to interfere with that, and instead to begin to subtly threaten Claudius. This is one Lucianus, nephew to the king. Ophelia, you are as good as a chorus, my lord. And then what does Hamlet do at line 241? He actually turns to Lucianus, the actor on the stage, and interrupts the actor on the stage. He yells out at him, "Begin, murderer! Leave thy damnable faces and begin! Come, the croaking raven doth bellow for revenge." The croaking raven doth bellow for revenge. This isn't a play, originally, right? This is not a play about revenge. This is a play about a murder. And suddenly Hamlet has turned this into a play about revenge. Again, you see his desire for revenge, wanting revenge. Again, you can see the threat here. And who is the croaking raven that's bellowing for revenge? We recall and we see on stage that Hamlet is the only character on stage still dressed in all black. He's still in his mourning clothes. He is like the raven dressed in black. And the raven, of course, is a conventional symbol for an ill omen. Something bad is coming. And who's croaking at this point? Hamlet. Hamlet's bellowing, he's croaking, he's actually interrupting the actor on the stage and yelling at the actor on the stage to hurry up and get on with the performance. He cries out, "Come, the croaking raven doth bellow for revenge." And so the Lucianus, in this case now representing Prince Hamlet, pours the poison in the sleeping Gonzago's ear, who now is representing Claudius. And Hamlet once again interrupts the play, and he says at line 247, he poisons him in the garden for his estate. Lucianus, Prince Hamlet, poisons Claudius in the garden for his estate, for his kingdom. There's the threat here. This is what's going on in scenario B. Claudius is innocent. It's why he doesn't react during the dumb show. It's why he does react when he sees his wife is upset by the dialogue. And he does react here at this point. It's at this point when Hamlet says he poisons him in the garden for his estate that Ophelia exclaims, "The king rises." And the king does rise at that instant and calls out for light. And he exits the stage. Why does he exit? In the second interpretation, as a few critics have noted, the king could be innocent. But because Hamlet is unable to contain himself, because of his need for revenge, because of his hatred of his uncle, because of his desire to believe the ghost, he threatens Claudius. He interferes with the work of art, the art that was supposed to enlighten, that was supposed to be a tool of revelation. Instead, Hamlet threatens. He's overwhelmed. The man of reason is overcome. He's overwhelmed by his needs, his desires, his psychological desires here. And so this is the second way to interpret the play. There is a third way as well, as a few critics have noted, and that is that Claudius is guilty, and at the same time, he feels threatened. And once again, you can probably understand now why. Claudius watches the dumb show. He doesn't react because he imagines it must be a coincidence. After all, when I committed this crime, when I murdered my brother in the garden, there were no witnesses. I committed the perfect crime. No one saw what occurred. So this has to be a coincidence. So Claudius, being sharp, remains calm and doesn't in any way reveal that he is indeed guilty. The dialogue occurs. Claudius steps in. It could be on behalf of Gertrude. He sees that she's alarmed, but most likely, more likely, it's this idea that this provides him with a chance to halt the play, halt the production of the play, because he can see if he's trying to determine if there's a fence of what's going to unfold, if what's going to unfold is actually going to expose him in some way, expose his guilt, because in this third scenario, he is guilty. Then, during the passage I've just analyzed here, during the murder itself, that Claudius does feel threatened because Hamlet, in the middle of the production, again, he can't simply remain emotionally disconnected from what's going on. Instead, he can't contain his emotions, and instead he begins to interrupt the play, interfere with the production, and in doing so, he actually threatens Claudius. The characters now assume these, right, are now representing these people. And that last line in particular, he poisons him in the garden for his estate. So Claudius feels threatened. Claudius imagines that Hamlet, in both these scenarios here, where Claudius feels threatened, he imagines that Hamlet has been behaving so strangely uh, uh, because Hamlet resents Claudius having ascended to the throne, having been elected to the throne. That Hamlet, like Claudius, this is what Claudius is imagining, that Hamlet, like Claudius, is an ambitious man, that Hamlet believes that he was the rightful heir to the throne, and that Claudius usurped uh, 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 power, and the kingship should have gone to Hamlet. And that's why Hamlet is now actually threatening to kill the king and to take the throne, to to become king himself. Hamlet wishes to become king himself, and so in this third scenario, Claudius is guilty and threatened. The play does its work; it catches the conscience of the king. He sees the enormity, the horrific nature of his act of having murdered his brother, but he also feels threatened here. So, as I said, Hamlet himself believes this is what occurs. That Claudius is guilty, that the play has caught his conscience. And again, most people in the audience believe this, and even most critics and scholars believe this. There are a few opposing voices here who argue that either one of these two scenes is a possibility. Either one of these two scenarios is a possibility, that this is what could have occurred. And you can see when you go through the text and analyze it here, Shakespeare is at pains to show us that Hamlet can't keep quiet. He can't behave. He has to he has to revenge himself. He has to take vengeance on Claudius, and this is what occurs. Um, so which is it? What actually happens here? Is Claudius guilty? Or is he innocent and he's felt threatened and that's why he flees the scene? Or is he both guilty and feeling threatened? Um, I would argue, and I haven't seen any critics discuss this idea, I would argue that there is no way for Hamlet to actually know. Hamlet can't possibly know. Hamlet thinks he knows. He thinks Claudius is indeed guilty. In fact, look what he says to Horatio after everyone has fled the stage. Hamlet and Horatio are alone on stage. I'm on page 1448 at line 271. Remember, Hamlet has revealed enough information to Horatio, enough information concerning the ghost story, uh, that so that Hamlet can have Horatio watch Claudius as well. He wants Horatio to witness how Claudius reacts to the play. Uh, and Horatio is gaining, as the play Hamlet develops, Horatio is gaining Hamlet's confidence. Hamlet feels that Horatio is trustworthy and that he can reveal certain things about the ghost story to Horatio. And it's a very smart move on Hamlet's part, isn't it? Isn't it? Because he probably realizes that he might indeed have difficulty being objective when he's watching his uncle watch the play. Can he control himself? And here he's got a man, a Horatio, a friend Horatio, he believes is dispassionate, can in fact look and watch and see what occurs and can objectively analyze what exactly happens. And look at these lines, line 271. After everyone else, except with the exception of Horatio and Hamlet, have fled the stage, Hamlet turns to Horatio and says, "Oh, good Horatio, I'll take the ghost's word for 1,000 pounds. Didst perceive?" So Hamlet believes the ghost is telling the truth, that Claudius is a murderer, that Claudius is a fratricide, that Claudius killed his brother. And he's telling Horatio, "Did you see? Did you see Claudius's reaction?" And look at Horatio's response. "Very well, my lord." Period. That's it. "Very well, my lord." Notice that Horatio doesn't draw any conclusions from his observations. He just agrees, "Yes, I noticed that Claudius reacted." But everybody at court, and we sitting in the audience, everybody, we all noticed that Claudius reacted. But but Horatio doesn't draw this conclusion that therefore Claudius is guilty. So, and again, it's repeated. Hamlet says next, "Upon the talk of the poisoning," and look at Horatio's response. Yet again, "I did very well note him. I observed him. Yes, he reacted. Period. Nothing else." And again, I think this is Shakespeare's way of saying, yes, has seen Hamlet sees what he wants to see. That's why he's interpreted this first scenario here. Claudius is guilty because he wants Claudius to be guilty. And Hamlet is unaware that he actually has opened up these other two possibilities because of his interference with the play, with the production. That now these two possibilities present themselves, and Hamlet is unaware of that. Uh, and I would argue that the reason most people in the audience see this particular scenario as being true as well, they believe the ghost story as well, is because by this time, most people in the audience are identifying with Hamlet. Their heart goes out to Hamlet. They see, his pain and his suffering and the hardships he's enduring. And so they, like Hamlet, they're identifying with him, and they too want Hamlet to be correct in his assessment of Claudius's guilt. And critics and scholars, I suspect, I think I know why most of them believe that this is the correct interpretation too. But I'll wait till the next lecture to tell you because I don't, uh, I don't want to give away uh, any clues to this just yet, so that we ourselves, if you haven't read further into the play, you may also at this moment, after having read this scene, the play within the play scene, you may also have thought that Claudius was indeed guilty because of his reaction, because of his having cried out, his having risen and cried out for lights, and then fled the stage. So let's just leave it there when it comes to why do most critics and scholars believe that agree with Hamlet and Hamlet's the conclusion that Claudius is guilty. Because Horatio, we see here Horatio, and again, I think it's Shakespeare's subtle way, the play's subtle way of showing us that this is questionable. This is suspect. Because Hamlet interfered with the play's production, that we can't really determine if this scenario A is actually accurate, if it is what actually occurred. Hamlet thinks he knows. He thinks he knows, but I would argue that he can't possibly know. He can't possibly know because of these other two possibilities, these other two scenarios. That particularly this scenario, Claudius could be innocent, and the only reason he fled the stage was because he felt threatened. But even if he's guilty and threatened, Hamlet still can't know for certain because he did not allow the play itself. Remember, he says the play is the thing. The play's the thing wherein I'll catch the conscience of the king. The play will enlighten the king. The play will cause the king to suddenly become aware and comprehend and understand what he's done. But Hamlet doesn't allow the play to catch the conscience of the king. Instead, Hamlet is out of control because of his need, his psychological desire. He really wants Claudius to be guilty here. I would also argue that Hamlet will never know. I mean, he thinks he knows this. Remember, he thinks he knows that Claudius is guilty. He feels absolutely certain that the ghost is telling the truth. But I would argue that he will never know that this was the one opportunity he had. The one opportunity he had by putting on this production to find out beyond a rational doubt if Claudius was indeed guilty. Because remember, the only way to truly know if Claudius committed the crime is for Claudius himself to come forward and to confess. Because it is the perfect crime. When Claudius flees the stage, he doesn't think that Hamlet knows of his crime. He still believes he's committed the perfect crime. He's guilty here and he flees because the art has caught his conscience. Here he flees because he's innocent. He never committed the crime. And here he flees not because he thinks that Hamlet has suddenly discovered that Claudius is a murderer. Claudius doesn't flee the stage because of this. He flees for two reasons. First, it has caught his conscience. The play has caught his conscience. And second, he feels threatened. So never in the play, at least I can't find any indication in the play that Claudius ever suspects that Hamlet knows he's a murderer, that Claudius is a murderer. I haven't been able to find any evidence of that in the text to support that. And I would argue that, as I said, that Hamlet doesn't know. He thinks he knows, but he can't possibly know. And I would further argue, a deeper irony is that Hamlet will never know. All the way to the end of the play, he will never, ever know for absolute certainty whether Claudius killed his father, though he thinks he does. And that's an interesting irony that Shakespeare, that the play leaves us with. So I hope I've explained that clearly enough. And yeah, I think I have. But if you have any questions, of course, just let me know during our chat time. Let's turn next to Hamlet's fifth soliloquy. and I'm on page 1450 at the bottom of the page. So, just to give you the context of the soliloquy, uh, Polonius arrives on stage, and informs Hamlet that Hamlet's mother, Gertrude, wishes to speak with Hamlet. Gertrude's very upset. She's upset with her boy because of his behavior, because of the play, because he's upset the king, and she wants to talk to him. She wants to give him a good talking to. And Hamlet tells Polonius that he will see his mother shortly. And so Polonius exits the stage. Horatio exits, Polonius exits. Everyone has left the stage except Hamlet. Hamlet is all alone on stage, and he speaks his fifth soliloquy. And it begins at line 367 at the bottom of page 1450. And I'm still in Act 3, Scene 2. It's the end of this scene. And look at Hamlet. We've seen since the beginning of the play within the play, we've seen Hamlet's in an aggressive, combative mood. I mean, the moment that all the other people of the court come on stage, Hamlet begins ridiculing them and mocking them under the guise of madness, right? He's assumed his antic disposition. It's a way for him to revenge himself, to pretend, to feign madness, and he's very combative. He's wanting to fight. He's ready for a fight. He's energized. He riddles with Claudius. He insults Claudius. He insults Polonius. He disrespects his mother, and he's extremely offensive toward Ophelia. All of the sexual innuendos and the sexual puns, if you recall, that he uses before the play within the play begins. He attacks Ophelia, and he's quite vulgar, quite nasty toward her. So this is a man who is ready. He's ready for a fight. He's ready for war here. And here we see it in his fifth soliloquy when he's all alone on stage and he believes that Claudius is indeed guilty. He knows for certain Claudius is indeed. The ghost is telling the truth. The ghost is trustworthy. It's an honest ghost. It's a spirit of health. And the ghost has reported what actually occurred. Claudius is a villain, a lecherous, treacherous villain, and Hamlet is ready now to kill. And look what he says: "'Tis now the very witching time of night, when churchyards yawn, and hell itself breathes out contagion to this world." Notice what Hamlet's doing here. He's assuming the role of the classical avenger, isn't he? He's breathing fire. He's ready for blood, this bloodthirsty mood he's in. He's ready to kill. He's ready to revenge. He's ready to hunt down his uncle Claudius and revenge the ghost, his father's foul and most unnatural murder. 'Tis now the very witching time of night. It's almost as if Hamlet is he's sort of setting the mood, isn't he? Setting the atmosphere. He's like a director in this particular scene. He's setting the scene, and he wants to set a mood of revenge, a mood of an atmosphere of murder. And so he describes the scene so that he can assume the role of that stereotypical ancient classical avenger, like the ancient Roman or the ancient Greek. He can step in, he can assume that part and step into this particular atmosphere, this particular scene. So it's a way for him again to rouse himself, to stir himself, um, to act, to finally seek revenge, to finally fulfill his mission. But notice too the images here in this opening of his fifth soliloquy. "'Tis now the very witching time of night." We think of witches, right? Automatically, we're reminded that Hamlet is a Christian, and he imagines the existence of witches. The witching time. Remember, witches were women who were believed to be they possessed magical powers, and they received their powers from the devil himself. It is now the very witching time of night. And night, of course, again, the the conventional symbol for evil, for chaos, for confusion. Night is the time to strike, to kill. It's now the very witching time of night, a time to do mischief, a time for murder. When churchyards yawn, and again that Christian image here, churchyards yawning, the graves themselves are opening up, and the spirits, the restless spirits, the perturbed spirits are right. They rise from their graves and they begin wandering the earth. So you have this idea, again, this Christian imagery in the background. Uh, uh, Interesting that he is assuming the role of the classical avenger, and yet the backdrop that he's painting here, that he's imagining, is primarily a Christian backdrop, isn't it? When churchyards yawn and hell itself breathes out contagion to this world. So hell itself, right, is opening up, and all of the evil and the pestilence and the horrors and the contagion, the diseases, all of that is rising up and infecting this world, permeating the atmosphere and infecting it. And look what he says next here. Now could I drink hot blood. This idea of drinking the blood of one's enemy, and by doing so, one is somehow by drinking the blood of one's enemy, one actually takes on more power. Actually, the becomes more powerful in doing so, in killing one's enemy and drinking his blood. I'm also reminded here too of this again in Shakespeare's day. Many Christians believed that, of course, in witches, there was the notion that witches would steal Christian babies and would murder them and drink their blood. So you have this idea here too operating in this passage. Now could I drink hot blood? So we see he's ready for blood. He's ready for murder, to kill, and do such bitter business, such cruelty, such acts of cruelty, and do such bitter business as the day would quake to look on. And again, day in contrast to night. Day, of course, the sun representing light and truth and reason. So you see that again, this idea of the rational man has been consumed, and now it's the man of vengeance, the man of blood, the man of desire and passion, who's ruling Hamlet here, who's got Hamlet in control. Um, and then the irony appears, soft now to my mother. And suddenly we recall, don't we, that Hamlet isn't off to hunt down Claudius. He's not seeking out Claudius at this moment. That his mother wants to see him. She wants to scold her son, tell him to straighten up, and that's where he's going to see his mother. And so you see the irony in this moment here. Soft now to my mother. He's going to see his mother. And look what he says next at the top of page 1451. O heart, lose not thy nature. He has to remind himself, remember who you are. She's your mother, you're her son. Don't forget that natural bond, that natural relationship. Don't forget you should respect your mother. You owe her obedience. And don't in any way forget that. Lose not your nature. Let not ever the soul of Nero enter this firm bosom. And look at the reference to Nero here. I believe in your footnote. Yes, there's a footnote here at the bottom of the page. Nero, the Roman Emperor Nero, known for his excesses, was believed to have uh, murdered his mother. So Nero, the legend has it that he uh, had his mother murdered. Some legends, uh, one particular legend says that Nero himself murdered his mother. But Hamlet here, in referencing Nero, he's saying, let me not be like Nero. Let me not commit matricide. Let me not kill my own mother the way Nero killed his mother. Again, this reference to ancient Rome, to classical antiquity. And Hamlet has to remind himself, don't control yourself. Make sure, right? Because Hamlet is in this, as I said earlier, he's in this bloodthirsty mood. He wants blood. He wants revenge. And here he has to remind himself not to become like Nero. Let not ever the soul of Nero into this firm bosom. He has to remain resolute. Remember his place. Remember that Gertrude is his mother. But the irony is the very idea that he has to that he said when he references Nero, the very idea that he has to remind himself, don't be like Nero. He's in a sense, isn't he? He's invoking the spirit of Nero and reminding himself not to be like Nero. He's actually remembering Nero, and in that sense, he's invoking the spirit of Nero. So we begin to wonder: will he be able to control himself when he goes to see his mother? He says next, let me be cruel, not unnatural. So he wants to punish her. He wants to be cruel to her. He wants to berate her and he wants to finally open up and let her know, lash out at her and let her know just how absolutely disgusted he is with her behavior, with her having remarried his uncle of all people, his uncle Claudius, this man of personal ambition, this man of self interest, this treacherous villain, lecherous villain. He really can't understand. I mean, it just the very thought it just makes it just causes him all sort. He just repulsed by the very thought itself, isn't he? Let me be cruel, not unnatural. So again, he wants to harm her. He wants to verbally attack her and harm her, but he has to remind himself yet again here, don't go any further than that. Don't become unnatural. Don't commit the crime of matricide. Don't be a matricide. Don't don't be a son who kills his mother, who murders his mother. And he says, I will speak daggers to her, but use none. Great metaphor, isn't it? I will speak daggers to her. He wants to slice her to ribbons. Physically, that he's longing to do that, you can imagine, but he'll remind himself he'll only figuratively, not literally, use daggers on her, but only figuratively. He'll speak daggers to her. He'll let her know finally, just how the magnitude, the horror of her having married his uncle so shortly, particularly so shortly after his father's death. And this is what he wants to let her know. He will speak daggers to her, but he has to remind himself yet again, but use none. Again and again, he has to keep telling himself, I've got to be careful. I have to make certain. I can't in any way lose control of my desires here. That I have to somehow uh, uh, simply rebuke my mother. I simply be. I have to simply uh, uh, abuse her verbally, but I can't attack her in any way physically. He has to keep telling himself this, doesn't he? He says, I will speak daggers to her, but use none. My tongue and soul in this be hypocrites. How in my words some error she be shent, to give them seals, never my soul consent. So yet again, he will speak daggers to her. He will use his tongue. He will lash out. He will accuse her of misbehaving, of being unfaithful, of being inconstant. but he will not allow his desires to go further than that. He won't, his words, the harsh words he will use, he won't allow those words to become actions. He won't fulfill those words. He won't allow himself to act. But in this mood that he's in, this state of this state of desiring of wanting revenge, wanting blood, one has to begin to wonder: will he be able to control himself? I think Shakespeare. I think the play here is creating suspense in the audience's mind, right? Wondering, will Hamlet be able to keep these murderous impulses? Will he be able to keep these in check when he actually confronts his mother? When they actually meet, will he be able to refrain from harming her, from murdering her? So we're left in suspense at the end of this particular scene, Act 3, Scene 3, the play within the play scene. We're left in suspense. We're left with this irony. And we're left wondering, too, finally, what is the reality here? What actually happened here? Hamlet thinks he knows what's happened. He thinks he knows, right, for certainty, that the king is guilty. This is what he thinks. But we can see that he can't possibly know. He can't possibly know if Claudius is guilty. And I'd make the further argument, something that I haven't been able to find other critics making, that Hamlet will never know, because he's missed his one chance, his one opportunity to know the truth, to use art, right? To be the man of reason, to let art speak for him, and so doing, catch the conscience of the king, because that's the only way that we can ever know that Claudius is guilty, is if he comes forward and confesses the crime. So, what do you think at this stage? If you haven't read further into the play, because it will be revealed to us in the next scene which of these scenarios is indeed the truth. But if you haven't read the next scene yet, which is often referred to as the prayer scene, that's Act 3, Scene 3. So if you're wanting to know, if you have a desire, a need to know what the truth is here, you will discover the truth finally in Act 3, Scene 3. What do you think? Is Claudius guilty? Is the ghost telling the truth? Can that ghost be trusted? What is it that you think at this point? Who's there? Be gone.